Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for asking me along today. And as you've heard, we do have an unusual event in London this year in terms of the Olympics, which has required a great deal of forward planning and coordination, and obviously coordination with the Olympic authorities in particular. And the idea, as far as transport is concerned, is you won't hear about transport in the Olympic Games because it will all work perfectly well. And you'll hear about the sporting achievements rather than what might have gone wrong on the railways or the roads or somewhere else. That's the objective. So if you don't hear from me or from many of my colleagues during the Olympics or immediately afterwards, that is a sign, not that we've gone on holiday, but that we've had a successful Games transport-wise. We want to make this, for practical but also for environmental reasons, a public transport Games. And by public transport Games, we mean largely rail. And the plans to ensure the system copes and works have been now being thought through, developed, initiated for several years now. We have, just to give you an idea, we're expecting 800,000 spectators every day, 55,000 athletes, officials and members of the media, as well as thousands of other people involved in staging the Games, travelling for the wider celebrations that are planned in London and around the UK. To put that in perspective, there are around 12 million public transport journeys in the capital every day. So it's a significant uplift. Now, some of that can be diverted, and one of the strands which I'm responsible for in the Department for Transport is persuading people not to travel. As part of my responsibility as a Transport Minister, to persuade people not to travel. And that is both sensible during the Olympic Games, but actually from a wider perspective as well, in terms of minimising carbon impact and maximising profits for businesses if people can avoid travelling through using teleconferencing, through using remote hubs, through having flexible working arrangements, through coming into different railway termini, then that is all to the good. And we've had a trial at the Department for Transport and across government when we managed to persuade around 3/4 of our workforce to travel differently or not travel during a trial period we had last year. So with our London partners in the Mayor's Office and Transport for London, we are encouraging businesses to think differently during that period. But even if we do that, there's going to be a massive increase in the number of people who want to travel. So we've been planning for that, and we've been improving the connectivity to the Games area in a way that's benefited East London, which has probably some of the worst transport connections in London, and will finish with some of the best transport connections in London. So there will be a real legacy, a transport legacy from these Games. And that's been achieved. It's by and large on target. In fact, it's ahead of a target in many cases, through good cooperation between the government, the London authorities, Network Rail, our infrastructure manager, Transport for London and Highways Agency, and others. And I think it's been a happy preparation. It's seen, for example, a 50% increase in the Dockland Light Railway capacity, which is, of course, just around the corner from here, with the line extended to Woolwich and Stratford International. We've got extra capacity on tube lines, the Jubilee line with a signalling upgrade now complete, and on the Central line through Stratford. We've established a Javelin high-speed service between St Pancras International and Stratford International, which means trains will take just 7 minutes to cross that distance. We've refurbished and extended London Overground services on the East London and North London lines. We've upgraded National Rail services on the Lee Valley and Great Eastern lines. King's Cross, St Pancras and Stratford have been essentially rebuilt and expanded with step-free access and extra capacity. And if you haven't seen the new concourse at King's Cross, I would urge you to do so. Railway architecture in the 21st century in this country is, I think, really quite superb. The King's Cross and the St Pancras developments have been really top class compared to what was some average development, really pretty average development in the 1960s and 70s. This is really good stuff we're now seeing, and putting railways back on the map. A statement to say we believe in railways. We've seen Southfields, which serves Wimbledon, become step-free, and Green Park as well, which is the vital accessibility hub. And we've improved walking and cycling routes across the Olympic Park. So all that is very good news indeed. There will be 10 railway lines running into Stratford for the Olympics from different directions, including the high-speed Javelin I mentioned, and up to 1 train every 15 seconds serving the Olympic Park. 240 trains an hour, making Stratford one of the best connected locations in the world. Now, That's some of the railway infrastructure, but of course we've also had to plan in different ways for the Olympics. We've had to plan at a most basic level, where are the toilets? Do we have toilets on stations? Do we not? How far away are they? How do we deal with the numbers of people who've got particular accessibility needs, particularly for Paralympic Games? How do we ensure that the trains can cope? How do we ensure that we don't have engineering works taking place during the Olympics? We don't. Nothing will happen during the Olympics in engineering terms. In fact, what will happen instead is every train we can find running at maximum length and maximum hours during the day. So we're putting every single thing we can into making sure that the infrastructure and the service from the railway is as thorough as possible. We've also had to look at, of course, Plan B. What happens if something goes wrong? And there have been, as you would expect, a number of exercises to test what will happen if we have, for example, a theft of cable at a particular location, if there's an accident at a particular location, if a train fails somewhere. Those things have been all programmed in and tested. So I'm very confident, I say that here now, very confident that this will be a good public transport Olympics. Let me just say something else briefly on the wider infrastructure in London, since we're in London. And I want to put on record that this is the most pro-rail government in this country we've now had for decades. We've now got the biggest infrastructure investment programme in rail across the country, taking place since Victorian times, since the 19th century. Some of that has been to improve existing infrastructure, and you'll know there are particular challenges with dealing with the legacy, which is not necessarily one that you would have built in the way you would build it now. The oldest tube line in London is 1863, which I used, in fact, to come here today. Still working very well, but when you want to retrofit some of these lines and systems, there is a challenge to deal with what the Victorians left us 150 years ago. If you get a chance to visit Blackfriars, essentially, Network Rail has built a brand new station spanning the Thames. It's done it with huge restrictions in terms of gigantic pillars in the river, listed buildings that have to be protected, riverboats running through, and they've done so with all the train services running through all the time and not being stopped. So Network Rail has achieved something fantastic in terms of retrofitting what's already there. And I think we're becoming very good in this country at managing to keep services going, improve them, but also update our Victorian infrastructure. Part of the investment in rail has been the decision of the government to proceed with Crossrail, which is vital new transport infrastructure to help London's economic growth. It will deliver faster journey times, a 10% uplift in rail-based capacity, bring an additional 1.5 million people within 45 minutes of London's business centres, and facilitate employment growth of 30,000 jobs by 2026 in central London. It will employ up to 14,000 people at its peak on construction, and enabling works for that are already underway, and tunnelling has begun. We've kept the price down as well. We are confident it will cost no more than 14.5 billion. Doesn't sound much when you say it quickly, does it? But it could have been a lot more. We're also progressing with the so-called Thameslink programme in its entirety, which will dramatically increase capacity and accessibility to and through the heart of London on the Thameslink route. And that will provide 24 trains an hour in each direction between St Pancras and Blackfriars in the peak periods. It will link the counties around London, Sussex, Kent, Surrey, through central London with Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire. And as you'll know, as train operators, if you're involved in train operation, being able to run a train through to a distant terminus gives much more flexibility on the network than having to terminate it somewhere and turn it round. So that's going to be very helpful indeed for getting more trains through. The capital cost for new infrastructure and new rolling stock is thought to be 6 billion. We've spent 2 billion already, particularly at Blackfriars, as I mentioned, but also at Farringdon. And we're reconstructing the station at London Bridge entirely, which will be finished by 2018, sadly not before the Olympics, but in 2018. And beyond that, let me just say, in terms of railway infrastructure in this country, we're also, of course, committed now to High Speed 2, which will connect Birmingham, Manchester, and change the geography of this country. Birmingham will be 45 minutes away from central London by train. That means Birmingham Airport, for example, will be nearer central London in train time than Heathrow is by the tube. you start changing geography of the country. Manchester will be 1 hour and 8 minutes away from central London by high-speed rail. And we're busy for environmental reasons on a major programme of electrification. This is because we think transport investment is essential, despite the difficult economic circumstances that we inherited from our predecessors when public spending was, I think, a bit out of control. We were spending £4 for every £3 we got in. We've kept transport infrastructure going. We've kept the investment going because we believe that transport infrastructure investment is very good for creating growth and creating jobs, and also it's essential if we're going to cut our carbon emissions. So I think we've got a very good story to tell on rail. I think we've got a good story to tell on London and a good story to tell on the Olympics as well. I hope some of you who are here today from other countries will enjoy your time in this country, and if you get a chance to come back for the Olympics, you'll be very welcome, and I hope you'll find the transport system working smoothly, efficiently and effectively during that time. Thank you very much.